Everything you think is happening to you is actually happening through you. Jung discovered the one truth that makes every other truth obvious. Your entire life is a projection of your psyche. Every person you meet, every situation you face, every problem you have, it's all you meeting yourself over and over again. Once you really understand this, not intellectually, but in your bones, every other psychological insight becomes unnecessary, because you'll have the master key that unlocks everything. Today I'm going to show you what Jung saw that changed psychology forever. And if you really get this, if it actually lands, you might never need another video about transformation, healing, or self-improvement again. Because you'll finally understand the game you've been playing without knowing you were playing it. Here's what Jung realized that shattered everything. You've never actually experienced objective reality. Not once, not ever. Every single moment of your life has been filtered through your psyche, through your complexes, your shadow, your projections, your unconscious patterns. You've been living in a psychological simulation of your own creation, thinking it was real. That person who betrayed you, that was your psyche showing you something about trust. That opportunity you missed, your psyche revealing something about readiness. That pattern that keeps repeating, your psyche trying to make something conscious. You haven't been living life. You've been living your psychology. And until you see this, really see it, you're trapped in an endless loop, fighting shadows on the wall, thinking they're real monsters. Jung called this the projection of the unconscious, but it's bigger than that term suggests. It's the fundamental structure of human experience, and once you understand it, everything changes. Not because your life changes, but because you finally see what your life actually is. Your life is a perfect mirror of your psyche, and you've been attacking the mirror thinking it was the problem. Jung discovered that everything, literally everything you experience, is a reflection of your internal state, but not in some mystical law of attraction way, in a precise psychological way that's actually mappable. Here's how it works. Your unconscious is constantly projecting itself onto the world. Every unintegrated part of your psyche gets projected outward and appears to come at you from outside. Your shadow shows up as the people who trigger you. Your anima or animus shows up as who you're attracted to. Your complexes show up as your recurring problems. You're not experiencing life. You're experiencing your own unconscious, externalized. Think about someone who really bothers you, not someone who's actually harmful, just someone whose personality makes you irrationally angry. That's not them you're seeing. That's your own rejected aspect. You hate in them what you've disowned in yourself. Now think about someone you're obsessed with, can't stop thinking about. That's not them either. That's your own unlived potential, your inner feminine or masculine, projected onto them like they're a movie screen. Every single experience is this. Jung proved this with thousands of patients. The woman who kept attracting narcissists, she was projecting her own disowned self-importance. The man who kept getting betrayed, he was projecting his own capacity for betrayal that he couldn't face. The person surrounded by chaos, they were projecting their own inner disorder. But here's where it gets profound. Once you see that it's all projection, you stop fighting the mirror. Think about how insane it would be to punch a mirror because you don't like your reflection. That's exactly what you've been doing your entire life. Fighting with people who are just showing you yourself. Resisting situations that are just revealing your psyche. Running from experiences that are just your unconscious becoming conscious. Jung had a patient who complained that everyone in her life was controlling. Every relationship, every job, every situation. Someone was always trying to control her. She spent years fighting these controlling people, leaving relationships, quitting jobs, moving cities. Then Jung helped her see the control wasn't out there. She was projecting her own disowned need for control. She was so terrified of her own controlling nature that she projected it onto everyone else and then fought it externally. The moment she saw this, everything shifted. Not because the world changed, but because she stopped fighting her own projection. She took back the projection, owned her own controlling nature, and suddenly, the controlling people either disappeared from her life or stopped seeming controlling. This is the first key insight. Your life problems are projection problems. You're not struggling with reality. You're struggling with your own unconscious material that appears as reality. Every difficult person is a difficult part of you. Every recurring situation is an unintegrated aspect of your psyche. Every pattern is a projection asking to be reclaimed. But here's what makes this the last video you need. Once you see everything as projection, you stop trying to fix life and start integrating your psyche. You stop fighting out there and start working in here. You stop being a victim of circumstances and start being a student of your own unconscious. The mirror principle changes everything because it reveals that you've been playing both sides of every conflict. You're the projector and the screen, the dreamer and the dream, the one who sees and what's being seen. You're not living a life. You're creating a life unconsciously, moment by moment, and then forgetting you created it. Jung discovered something that sounds like science fiction, but is psychological fact. Your unconscious is constantly creating your reality through projection, and then your ego experiences that reality as if it's happening to you. It's like being a filmmaker who makes a movie, develops amnesia, watches their own movie, and thinks it's real life. Here's the mechanism. Your psyche has certain patterns, complexes, unfinished business. These create what Jung called archetypal situations, basic templates of human experience, and your unconscious keeps creating these situations in your life until you recognize them as your own creation. The abandonment complex creates abandonment situations. The authority complex creates authority conflicts. The unworthiness complex creates experiences of rejection, not once, but repeatedly, like a broken record, until you finally hear the pattern. You're not unlucky, you're not cursed, you're unconsciously creative. Jung saw this with every patient. A man who complained about being unseen by others couldn't see that he was invisible to himself. A woman who felt constantly judged was running a 24/7 internal court where she was judge, jury, and defendant. A person who felt life was meaningless had never asked what meaning meant to them. They were creating their reality from their unconscious assumptions, then experiencing that reality as objective fact. But here's the mind-blowing part. You're doing this right now. This moment, the way you're receiving these words, the resistance or recognition you're feeling, the thoughts arising in response, it's all your psyche creating your experience of this video. Two people can watch the same video and have completely different experiences. One sees liberation, another sees nonsense. Same video, different psyches, different realities. Jung called this psychic reality. The fact that psychological reality is more real to us than physical reality. You don't live in the world, you live in your perception of the world, and that perception is created by your unconscious projections. This is why positive thinking doesn't work. You can't consciously think your way out of unconscious patterns. It's like trying to change a movie by yelling at the screen. The projection is coming from deeper than thought. But when you realize you're the projectionist, when you see that you're creating what you're experiencing, everything changes. Not because you can suddenly control everything, but because you finally understand what's actually happening. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What part of my psyche is creating this?" You stop being the victim of your movie and start being curious about why you're playing this particular film. Jung lived this way. When something difficult happened, he wouldn't just react. He'd ask, "What is my unconscious showing me through this situation?" When someone triggered him, he'd wonder, "What part of me is this person representing?" He treated his entire life as a communication from his unconscious to his conscious mind. And that's exactly what it was. Every problem you've ever had is the same problem: unconsciousness. Jung's most radical insight was that there's really only one problem in human life: unconscious material running your life from the shadows. Every other problem is just a symptom of this one problem. Depression, that's unconscious grief or anger turned inward. Anxiety, unconscious material trying to become conscious. Addiction, unconscious needs seeking fulfillment through unconscious means. Relationship problems, unconscious projections dancing with other unconscious projections. It's all the same problem wearing different masks. Think about your biggest current problem. Now realize that problem is not the problem. The problem is the unconscious pattern creating that problem. And that pattern will keep creating variations of that problem until you make it conscious. Jung had a patient who went through 5 marriages, all ending the same way. She thought she had bad luck with men. Jung showed her she had one unconscious pattern playing out 5 times. She wasn't meeting 5 different men. She was meeting her own unconscious pattern 5 times, dressed as different people. Once she saw the pattern, once she made it conscious, she didn't need a 6th marriage to learn the lesson. The pattern was complete. The unconscious material had become conscious. This is why Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Every fate is just unconscious pattern. Every bad luck is unconscious repetition. Every "that's just how life is" unconscious acceptance of an unconscious pattern. But here's the liberating truth. Since all problems are really one problem, there's really only one solution: consciousness. Not positive consciousness, not enlightened consciousness. Just plain consciousness, seeing what is actually happening versus what appears to be happening. When you see that you're creating your abandonment experiences, the pattern loses power. When you recognize you're projecting your shadow onto others, the projection returns. When you realize you're living out an unconscious complex, the complex dissolves. Consciousness is the universal solvent. It dissolves every problem by revealing that the problem was never what you thought it was. Jung discovered this personally during his confrontation with the unconscious. He was flooded with disturbing visions, overwhelming emotions, psychological chaos. His ego wanted to fight it, fix it, make it stop. But then he realized the chaos wasn't the problem. His unconsciousness about the chaos was the problem. When he stopped fighting and started observing, when he brought consciousness to the unconscious material, the chaos transformed into insight. The visions that seemed like madness became the seeds of his psychology. The emotions that felt destructive became creative energy. The chaos that appeared meaningless revealed profound meaning. Nothing changed except his consciousness about what was happening, and that changed everything. This is the master key. Every problem is solved the same way, by seeing what you couldn't see before, by making conscious what was unconscious, by recognizing your projection as projection. You don't need different solutions for different problems. You need consciousness applied to unconsciousness. That's it. That's the entire game. Here's why this might be the last video you need. Once you understand projection, you stop seeking answers outside and start finding them inside. Every book you read, every video you watch, every teacher you follow, you're not actually learning from them. You're learning from your own projections onto them. You're finding in them what already exists in you, but needs external permission to emerge. Jung discovered this with transference. Patients would project their unconscious material onto him and then learn from him what was actually their own wisdom. He wasn't teaching them. He was serving as a screen for their projections until they could reclaim them. This video isn't teaching you anything. It's reflecting something you already know but haven't made conscious. These aren't my words or Jung's words. They're your words, projected onto us, waiting for you to recognize them as yours. Think about every breakthrough you've ever had. It didn't come from new information. It came from suddenly seeing what was always there. The answer didn't arrive. It was revealed. You didn't learn something new. You remembered something forgotten. This is because everything you need to know is already in your unconscious. Every answer, every insight, every solution, it's all there, waiting to become conscious. Jung proved this with his technique of active imagination. He would have patients dialogue with their unconscious, and profound wisdom would emerge. Wisdom the patients didn't know they had, not channeled from outside, but arising from inside. The wise old man who gave guidance, that was their own inner wisdom projected as a figure. The divine child who brought renewal, their own creative potential personified. The shadow who revealed truth, their own rejected knowing. It was all them talking to themselves through the medium of projection. This is why you don't need more information. You need more consciousness about the information you already have. You don't need more answers. You need to see the answers hiding in your questions. Every seeking is actually avoiding. Every search outside is fleeing from inside. Every next video, book, or teaching is postponing the real work, facing what you already know but don't want to know. Jung said the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But you already are who you truly are. You're just unconscious of it. You don't need to become anything. You need to recognize what you've always been. The seeking ends when you realize everything you've been looking for is what's doing the looking. Here's the final truth that makes this the last video. You are not who you think you are. You're the one who's aware of who you think you are. Jung discovered that behind all the projections, beneath all the patterns, beyond all the complexes, there's something that doesn't project. The self. Not the ego self you identify with, but the self that witnesses all identifications. This self doesn't have problems because it doesn't identify with problems. It doesn't have patterns because it's what observes patterns. It doesn't project because it's what recognizes projections. You've been identifying with your projections, thinking you are your personality, your problems, your patterns. But you're not. You're what's aware of all of that. It's like you've been watching a movie and thinking you're a character in it, but you're not in the movie. You're watching the movie. You're not your life. You're what's experiencing your life. Jung called this the self with a capital S. And he said individuation is the process of shifting identification from ego to self, from the character to the witness, from the projection to what's beyond projection. This isn't spiritual bypassing, it's psychological fact. Right now, you're aware of reading these words. You're aware of thoughts arising. You're aware of feelings moving through you. That awareness, that's closer to what you are than any content of awareness. But here's why this matters practically. When you recognize yourself as awareness rather than content, every problem shifts. You're not depressed. You're aware of depression moving through you. You're not anxious. You're aware of anxiety arising. You're not your trauma. You're aware of trauma patterns playing out. This isn't denial. It's a fundamental shift in identity. And from this shifted position, you have options you didn't have when you thought you were the problem. Jung discovered this during his Red Book period. He was flooded with intense visions and emotions. His ego was terrified it meant madness. But then he found the witness position, the part of him that could observe the chaos without being consumed by it. From that position, he could engage the visions without drowning in them. He could dialogue with the figures without becoming them. He could experience the process without losing himself in it. He found the self that remains stable while everything else changes. The awareness that stays clear while all content clouds. The witness that remains free while the ego struggles. And once you find this, once you recognize yourself as the witness rather than the witnessed, the entire game changes. You stop trying to fix your projections and start observing them. You stop fighting your patterns and start studying them. You stop being your problems and start being curious about them. So, how do you actually live this? How do you shift from projection to recognition? Jung's method was simple but radical. Treat everything as communication from your unconscious. When someone triggers you, ask, what part of me is this person showing me? When a pattern repeats, wonder, what is my unconscious trying to make conscious through this pattern? When a problem persists, investigate. What unconscious material is creating this? But, and this is crucial, don't do this from the ego position of trying to fix things. Do it from the self position of curious observation. You're not trying to stop projecting. That's impossible. You're trying to recognize projection as projection while it's happening. You're not trying to eliminate patterns. You're trying to see them clearly. Jung called this holding the tension of opposites. You simultaneously live your life and observe yourself living it. You're in the movie and watching the movie. You participate and witness. This takes practice. The ego wants to collapse into identification. I am this problem. Or it wants to escape into spiritual bypassing. I'm above all problems. But individuation happens in the tension between these positions. You learn to say, I'm experiencing depression rather than I'm depressed. Anxiety is moving through me rather than I'm anxious. A pattern is playing out rather than this always happens to me. Small linguistic shifts that represent massive psychological shifts. Here's Jung's ultimate message. The thing that, if you really get it, makes everything else unnecessary. Your entire life is your unconscious becoming conscious. Every person, every situation, every moment. It's all your psyche trying to know itself through projection and recognition. You're not here to win at life. You're here to wake up to life. You're not here to solve all problems. You're here to recognize problems as projections. You're not here to become someone better. You're here to realize who you've always been. This isn't a philosophy or belief system. It's what's actually happening, whether you see it or not. Your unconscious is constantly projecting. Life is constantly reflecting. The question is whether you're conscious of the process. If this landed, really landed, you don't need another video. You have the master key. Everything is projection. Life is your mirror. Consciousness dissolves all problems by revealing them as projections. Most people will watch this and immediately look for the next video, the next teaching, the next answer outside themselves. They'll keep seeking instead of seeing. They'll keep projecting instead of recognizing. But maybe you're done with that. Maybe you're ready to stop looking for answers and start recognizing that you are the answer, playing hide and seek with yourself through projection. If you want to explore this deeper, subscribe. But know this, everything you need is already within you, projected as your life, waiting for you to recognize it as yourself. Jung's entire psychology leads to one recognition. It's all you. It's always been you. And the moment you really see this, the seeking ends and the finding begins. This might be the last video you need, not because it contains all answers, but because it reveals where all answers come from. They come from you. They always have.